Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Reviewcade. I'm Nick alongside
Andrew.
And this is our first ever review for the past month. As you all know, we have been playing Ori and the Blind Forest, of course, released in 2015. And we're here to discuss the level design, the accessibility, what we thought of the game, playing from Andrew's perspective as somebody with both of his arms, compared to me, somebody who has one arm. What are the differences? What are the similarities? Let's find out right now. And Andrew, let's talk about the level design, of course, because it's the first thing that you see. So, since this was your game, of course, you played on your Xbox, when you fired up Ori back then when you first got it compared to now, what were some similarities and what were some differences that you may have noticed in the presentation of the game?
I think that the game style that this has, I feel like this is one of those games that is going to go down, maybe not as like one of the greatest games of all time, gaming history, all that kind of stuff, but I feel like it is going to be one of those games that people fondly look back on and say, wow, Ori was a great game. Just on the visual end of things, I think that they do a spectacular job. I still find it to be absolutely beautiful. Like, probably a little bit more beautiful since, like, when I first played it, obviously.
Right.
The first time is so much more magical. But even playing through it again, the attention to detail, the amount of care that they put into the artwork for this game, even by today's video game standards, I think that they set a standard back then for the visual storytelling of this game. They do a phenomenal job visually with this game. I think it's absolutely beautiful.
And to piggyback of what you said, of course, this is a platformer, and in a lot of platformers, specifically in current platformers, you know, back then when you played platformers, some of the stages look the same and stuff like that. And even today, it's easy to, when you're going through stage to stage, and especially in a level design and a world design it is in Ori, it's easy for things to look the same. Like, well, wait a minute, I've been in this area before, when actually it's a new area. And you get confused and lose a sense of direction. Here in Ori, I felt like they did a really wonderful job of like, hey, you've actually been progressing in the stage because look at what this area looks like. Look at the enemy types that are in there. I thought it was a very beautifully crafted world. It was a world where, like, going back to an earlier episode where I said, you know, I'm not much of an explorer type. You know, when I played Tomb Raider, yeah, I like to kind of explore here and there, but I do that like when I beat the story. I'm focused on beating the story first, then exploring. With this, it's, as we saw with the upgrades and the abilities, you have to explore because, hey, if you want to go further in this map, well, you're going to need this jump ability, you're going to need this wall climbing ability, you know, in order to advance, so you go and have some fun. And it's what I like too is that
Allow your curiosity to wander.
Yes, and what I like too is that unlike a lot of platformers and stuff like that, there is no game over in this. You die as many times as you want.
You just go back.
And you can just go back and you can just explore and do all these fun things. And I will say this is just again, we did not finish the game, but we've played the game. If we spent a month playing the game to where we've faced off against a variety of different enemies, we've used multiple different upgrades and abilities and controls and stuff like that, and we've seen what a good portion of the world looks like and how it just differentiates and the little puzzles that are in there and things like that. And I like that it's a game where it makes you think, like, okay, the part where you had to pull the stone, you know, it's like, okay, and you had those like little clubs swinging around you and rotating around you, and you're like, oh, I know what I gotta do. I gotta pull this all the way forward and pull this all the way back so I can jump on it. I like things like that that make you think. It's not an overly hard game. This isn't a game where like you can adjust the difficulty settings or anything like that. It's basically like a normal setting.
Aesthetically speaking, I think this game does a phenomenal job of taking you from one location to the next and feeling like the transition between one space to another space is very natural, right? So going from the swampy area to the very windy area, the way in which the level is created and visually represented, I feel like they do a really great job of saying, well, now you're going from the swampy area to a more vertical tree area. You know what I mean? Like, they did a really great job of blending the environment. The other thing that is super interesting or super great about this game is the discovery level on the, you know, you need to explore to find your abilities, etc. I think that this is one of the few games that genuinely promotes your curiosity. It wants you to explore. It begs you to try things out. Like you said, it's not an overly difficult game, but the troubleshooting, if you're not a curious person, or you're not going to allow kind of your mind to wander on how to complete certain things or beat that stone thing, it was like the only jump that I had to make was like, okay, so where do I need to be standing for this? Oh, if I'm pushing, or if I can get behind it, or there were certain things that if I wasn't a curious person and I was just waiting for the game to tell me where to go, which we've talked about before, there's kind of a healthy blend of, well, do I need to go here or do I not? I think what this game does is it says, well, there's no way that I'm going to get to this one location. Like, you remember the big pool of water that I was jumping across, and I was like trying to get to the other side, and then I get to the wall, but I have like no health.
Yeah.
It's basic, it's the game design telling you, like, at some point you are going to be able to access this area. Don't forget that you should access this area. Come back and see what's up here, because something could be really awesome. A really cool upgrade could be waiting for you once you get the upgrades to complete this area. And I think that that's something that this game really, really executes well, is making things difficult if you're not meant to access them, but when you do access them, making them rewarding for your curiosity. I think that really is that's what this game captures, is motivating your sense of curiosity.
Before we move on to the controls, one last thing about the level design is, I like, as you said, it rewards your curiosity. It says, hey, you might not be somebody who likes to explore worlds. You might be a point A to point B type of person and gamer, where you're like, you know what, here's a story, I want to get through the story as fast as I can. Yeah, these areas are fine and cool and whatever, but they serve no purpose. I can't get anything out of them. And that's when, like, getting the upgrades, like getting the map locator and stuff like that, where you can, like, locate certain areas where you're like, oh, actually the map is this big, and here's where I can find this upgrade, I can find this little thing. Oh, what's this? It piques your interest. It does a good job of piquing your interest in going to those areas. And along those areas, you have different types of movements you have to do. So with that being said, let's discuss the controls. And I remember in an earlier episode when you first took over the game, and I asked you, was like playing, like, oh, this is totally different than when I remember playing when I first played it. So walk through those controls. I mean, of course, we had the issue with the wall jumping and stuff like that. But
it really comes down to that section. That section really demonstrated the either kind of the age of the game, and also the difference between when I first experienced it and when I experienced it now. Because now I have so many games where I'm used to the controls being just a little bit better at capturing the inputs that I'm putting in for my button presses, right?
Right.
When I first played this game, it was the same issue between the Xbox 360 and the Xbox One. Right. Now that I'm on a new generation, this game felt so snappy, because games prior to it didn't have as snappy of controls by comparison, right? So everything felt so crisp and clean and what have you, right? Now that time has passed, it's been, 5 years? It's 2015 that this came out. It's been 5 years since this game has been out, and I feel like the difference between then and now is I just have had more games with more responsive controls over the course and lifespan of the Xbox. Now, I do think that there are certain aspects when it comes to the controls where it is very responsive, but there were many times that both you and I ran into instances where it just didn't feel like the button presses were accurately picking up on what I was trying to do.
Especially in that wall climbing area where you have to get a running start and jump at a certain point, and like you're just missing that ledge by like half an inch, not even. And it's like you're just scraping by, and it makes you think like, oh, come on, if this was real, like you tell me Ori just can't like grab like right there, like it's right there. You know, it's not like you're missing it by like a giant amount. And when I played the game, going back to something that you had talked about, like when you played it from before and you realized the control, was more snappy and stuff like that. When I played Sonic Adventure for the Dreamcast, when it first came out on the Dreamcast, I'm like, oh my god, the controls are great, this is fun. But then I go revisit it a couple weeks ago on my PlayStation, and I'm like, oh my god, the controls are terrible, the camera's bad, because you haven't played it in so long. And you remember things differently when you're younger, of course, and when the games first come out compared to now, because, as you mentioned, time goes by, controls improve, games get better.
You're not used to, when it comes out for the first time, you're not used to how responsive it is.
Right.
And then over time you get used to how responsive it is, and then you go and visit those things. Aladdin is a great example of this. Aladdin was probably amazing and like just fantastically responsive back in the day by those times standards, but we have such different standards even in the 5-year period that this game has been out, that there's such a distinct change that you notice it. And I think that's something where this game has aged. I feel like if they could in some way, I mean, it's a 5-year-old game, so I doubt the company's, really itching to patch it. But that's what patches are for. If they would be able to go back and like really work on the responsiveness of the controls, it would make the experience of Ori that much better. I mean, I haven't played the new one, but we don't know. That could be the improvement that we're looking for.
And the new one, of course, being Will of the Wisps, which we will play on the show, but just at a later date.
Later time. We're gonna get our Ori fix some other time.
Yeah. But no, I agree. Like, as somebody with one arm, the one thing I look for in the controls were, again, going back to the wall issue. Go back and listen to some of our previous episodes with Ori, because there's a point where I'm like, man, my arm is killing me.
Exactly.
It hurts. And I mentioned how there are people who have cerebral palsy who can't repeatedly tap a button because it gets painful. Me, I'm playing with my elbow. I'm pressing buttons with my elbow, and that's a bone. And I'm constantly tapping a tap. It hurts after a while, and it gets tiring. And honestly, it kind of hurt me. That's why I was so eager to pass you the controller too, because I'm like, not only did I want you to experience it and re-experience it and see if it differed and everything like that, for the show's sake.
You needed a break.
I needed a break. That's what it was. My arm was hurting, man. I'm like, hey, do you want to maybe take over for a little bit?
There's definitely improvements that could be made. And when we review the next game, I think that it's important for us to keep in mind what has changed. Maybe they add a feature like we had talked about. I guess this kind of goes along the lines of improvements, but we talked about how like being able to attach yourself to the wall.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I understand the way in which this game flows. Like, I can understand the design desire behind wanting you to have to kind of like press the button multiple times against the wall, but my thumb was I was just like, why am I pressing the button so much? I would be fine if, say, Ori jumped to the wall and you had to hold A to hold on to the wall. That would be acceptable. I think that would be a really great improvement, and make the jumping window a little bit tougher, because you do have that sort of backup of being able to cling to the wall, but now make the spikes just a little bit, like you have to have a little bit better accuracy going around those spikes, right? That would balance it out, because if we had the wall climbing in the way that it is presently, it might not be as difficult, and the game still does need to be challenging, but with the way that it is right now, without that sort of wall clinging, it has an unnecessary amount of difficulty for individuals who need to have something like that.
Well, and even you said yourself, like, my thumb was getting tired, like my hand was getting... So, like, it's not just an issue for people like myself, it's an issue for all people who play the game, who are like, man, after a while, like, my hand starts to hurt, my thumbs start to hurt a little bit, and I like your idea of, if you jump to the wall, you just stick there, you hold the button. The attacks were great. I like the skill tree and how that was, and how you can evolve. It's like you're building your own Ori, basically, and how you want to do it. Some people will go all the way with the soul links. Some people go all the way with the flames and stuff like that. Some people go all the way with the maps and stuff like that. So it's like, it's really interesting to see how each person decides to build their own Ori. But along the way, it's like, you kind of want some breaks here and there, and I felt like the game wouldn't give you those breaks. Even though the controls are very simple, it felt like it sacrificed a little bit more ease of control for fluidity, because it wanted everything to be fluid. Like, hey, you gotta constantly be moving, constantly be going, go, jump, climb. And I felt like if there wasn't so much an emphasis on that, if it was more just like, hey man, go through this magical world and take your time and just chill on this ledge and climb this wall and go at your own pace, I think that would help. And with that being said, let's dive into the accessibility of it. And when we look at the controls themselves, very simple controls. It's press this button for this, press this button for that. I mean, the controls are so simple that literally you cannot change the control scheme in this game. We go to the options.
It has its benefits and its positives, but I feel like for the sake of accessibility, it has more of a negative nature than it has a positive nature.
Right.
Ultimately, the accessibility options generally in games at this time, I don't think were as prevalent as they are presently.
Right.
But one thing that I do remember you saying early on when we were reviewing this is how much you liked that it was a simple control scheme, that it wasn't like hold A, Y at the same time in order to, complete this action.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, the inability for it to be modified or changed is a detriment to individuals who need to be able to change it, to modify it, so that they can actually enjoy the game.
Right. Like, it would have been nice to maybe change the jump button to the left trigger or something like that. Or it would have been nice to, hey, here's your special ability, but you can change it to whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can change double if you want to double jump. You don't have to tap A, double tap the triggers or something like that. I do want to give this game a little bit of a break because, as you said, it was released 2015, and honestly, the need, and I should say the attention that the attention that was given to accessibility back then just wasn't really all there. That's why when you go to the options, you see the visual things. You can adjust the brightness and stuff like that, but you can't adjust the text size, what's being said on the screen.
There's no colorblind mode.
No, there's nothing like that. So in terms of accessibility, there's not much there, although what saves it a little bit is the simplicity of its controls. I feel like, even though this is 2020 and of course games and accessibility have gone much further, I feel like they kind of, at the same time, might have been thinking, hey, I know, instead of like some accessibility stuff, let's just make the controls super simple. It's like, could this game be more accessible? Yes.
Yeah.
One of the ways I feel like it could be more accessible, and something I mentioned in an episode, was instead of having to tap buttons, why don't we just have it to where like you can just hold a button down? Like instead of tapping
Key
X. Yeah, instead of tapping X to use your attack over and over and over again and hit multiple times, why don't we just hold X down? You can just have a continuous stream of fire going at people and stuff like that.
And that's like, I think of the shooters that I played on PC, for example, that you can select the option to either press to hold to zoom in on your scope, or click it and you will zoom. And I think that even a slight option like that, for you to be able to, like I said with the wall climbing, for you to be able to press and hold A on a wall and select that as an option would change the accessibility of this game tenfold, right?
Right.
It's a simple addition, but it would vastly change the experience of people like Nick, who it would make it just that much easier and less exhausting to have to climb a wall. I mean, if you wanted the difficulty of climbing the wall the way that we had to climb the wall, then sure, you should have access to doing that. But if you want to be a sadist, but at the same time, the accessibility option of being able to be like, I want to be able to keybind and allow myself a little bit of ease of access in something like wall climbing. A small change like that would have benefited this game 10 times over.
I look at a game like Marvel Spider-Man for the PS4 and how you do have the ability to, like for example, there are times where you have to tap a certain button to catch a truck and put it on its side. But instead, you can change the controls where you just hold the button down and then the circle fills up and stuff like that. And again, I know there's a year difference between when that game came out and this game.
Difference.
Yeah, financial differences too. Yes.
This is an indie.
Yes, this is an indie. But also at the same time, it's like I look at a game like Celeste where you can have all these different button options and reconfigure your full button remapping and stuff like that, and make things easier. And there's invincibility, so you don't have to worry about dying and stuff like that, and timing your jumps right. And again, who knows? We haven't played Will of the Wisps. Maybe they've
Will
fixed...
of the Wisp came out last year.
Yeah.
I think. And there's probably vast improvements in that area.
And so maybe they've made significant changes. So, we both talked about the controls, we talked about the level design, we've talked about, really the ways that accessibility can be increased in it. Hold the button down instead of having to tap. Have a colorblind mode, especially because there were times where, I'm not colorblind, but there were times where I couldn't see certain objects because they just blended in way too well with the environment. I couldn't find a certain switch or a certain
little
thing.
Orbs
The
that
little
would
orbs.
drop. Sometimes the yellow was not defined enough.
Yeah.
Right?
And so there could have been some things that could have been easier to find. And so with that being said, we're going to go into our ratings. Now, this is the first time we use this rating system, and this is a 0 to 5 scale, and we're going to discuss what each is. So instead of saying I give this game a 1, I give this game a 5, I give this game a 4, we ranked it on wording. So a 0 meaning this game is trash, has no replayability whatsoever, the accessibility is poor, controls are
do
bad.
not pick up this game is basically what
Yeah.
you're saying.
That we labeled that as a dumpster fire. And then a 1 is, it's still not good. So a 1 is a bad time. If we ranked it a 2 out of 5, that's unmemorable, meaning there were some things, but it wasn't that memorable, not really much replay value, nothing about the controls excited me, or none of the abilities excited me, so it's not really that memorable. 3 is average. That means that the game just meets some accessibility requirements, nothing special overall. 4 is press start, meaning you gotta play this thing now. You gotta download if you have Game Pass, if you have PlayStation Now, or if you have the ability to download the game and buy them off the store. Do that now because this game has everything you need. And 5, which is going to be a rarity, is perfection. Yeah. This is like
that's the
Witcher 3 level
very,
stuff.
Very rare. We're going to probably be giving out 5s.
Yes. Yeah. That's like, oh my god, this game blew my socks off. Full accessibility. Nothing about it was boring or anything like that. So, Andrew, with that being said, what would you rate Ori and the Blind Forest?
I have ratings in different areas. I think overall the game is an average verging on press to start.
Yeah.
Just because it's kind of a middle ground. I feel like accessibility wise it's not as accessible as you need it to be. It is an obvious issue, and that's why I think that it's closer to average, but considering the visuals, considering the way the story is told, considering the execution of the world, the music, the environment that it creates, that's why I say I think that it's almost a press start. When I played this game back in 2015, I still thought about it. I still kept it. I never deleted it. It is a game that will stick with you. It will last for a very long time in your memory. I mean, when we first started playing it, the intro had you almost crying. And I think that's why I think it's almost a press start, is because of the emotional level that this game instills, and that's mostly due to the environment and story. But overall, game wise, I'm gonna give it an average.
I share your sentiment where I too think it's an average, nearly edging on a press start. It's an average because of the level of accessibility, where the controls, they could have been a little bit better. I would have liked to see more. Yes, even though the controls are very simple and one button press basically, it would have been nice to remap those in some sort of way. It would have been nice to have it where I could hold a button down and not have to continually press it, and therefore feeling pain in my arm, And it's nearing a press start for a lot of reasons you had already mentioned. The music was amazing. The intro really draws you in. The sound design is fantastic, because the sound design is really important, because it's like it brings you into this magical world of Ori and really makes you want to keep playing it. There were times where I was like, I know we're not recording, but I would like to play some Ori right now.
Yeah. It calls to you. It begs for you to do it. And I think, again, back to the curiosity thing, I think that's also another reason why it's almost a press start, is very few games ever really make me want, like really reward me for being curious.
Right.
Like, I can think of Fallout or Skyrim, where it's like, part of the game is exploring every cave.
Yeah.
And getting shit, right? But I've never really played a game like Ori where I felt like, because I was curious, I was benefiting because of my curiosity.
It didn't feel repetitive.
No.
The game did not feel repetitive at all. No matter where you went, no matter what attacks you did, it did not feel repetitive at all. So again, I will label this an average as well. So Ori and the Blind Forest gets an average from us. This is our first time giving this out and doing this type of review for the show. And with that being said, let us know what you think about our review. What would you think about Ori? Would you give it a higher rating? Would you give it a lower rating? Let us know in the comments below. Also, be sure to hit us up on social media, facebook.com/ReviewCade, or also on Instagram and Twitter @ReviewCade as well. And hey, if you have a game recommendation, something you would like to see us play and review, feel free to tweet at us, feel free to comment on our Instagram post, write us, email us, reviewcade@gmail.com. And as always, Thank you so much for listening. Make sure you subscribe to us and hit that bell icon to get notifications when new videos go up. And with that being said, Andrew, it's time to reveal what we're going to be playing for the month of October.
Dun, 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 dun.